I've lived on Peaks Island for this year of orchestrating. There's something transformative about taking the boat. You really leave your troubles behind. There are 3 miles of water, and as you traverse the water, you are entering kind of the world of your work. There's no traffic, and I can walk to the water where I can kind of gather my thoughts and kind of collect my wits. I definitely feel like I'm functioning at a slightly slower pace. And for those who know me, that's kind of probably a good thing. I came to music actually first and foremost through popular music, which I was a rock drummer first. I didn't really have a lot of experience with opera till I got to college. You know, musically, I've had kind of a split identity for much of my life. One of the subtexts of writing this opera was putting those pieces together. I had actually been talking about writing an opera about Josh Gibson for as long as I can remember. And I wasn't sure if I was actually ever going to do it, but I was certainly going to talk about it a lot. Many people don't know who Josh Gibson is. And it's crazy that people don't know who he is. You cannot argue that he's not one of the 5 best hitters in baseball history, and some people will tell you he was the best. It immediately became apparent to me that he was an opera subject because he went crazy. And he died in January 1947, which is 3 months before Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier with the Brooklyn Dodgers. There are reports of him having been seen having imaginary conversations with Joe DiMaggio, which does happen in the opera. The first line he sings, he actually lists a bunch of baseball players. Jimmy Fox. But the question of Josh Gibson was a challenging one in some ways because he was not a crusader. He was not somebody who explicitly fought to break down the barrier of integration. And you know, one thing I realized is that it was his greatness that made a Branch Rickey understand that if you want to win the World Series, these are the guys you should be hiring. The ultimate motive behind integration was not altruism, it was money, and it was, you know, winning games. There's a character in the opera, Wendell Smith. He really, in the opera, is the crusader for integration. By the time Jackie Robinson was tapped, Josh already was addled with a brain tumor. He was drinking, he was doing drugs. He wasn't going to make it. He became representative of all of the Negro League players, and there was a whole world that was lost. There were Black-owned teams and thriving drinking and jazz establishment, a sense of cultural identity and purpose built up around following these teams and their exploits and these players. In a way, ended up being an opera about something a little bit more complex than just kind of like the biopic of Josh Gibson. The opera actually begins in 1957 in a barbershop in Brooklyn, 10 years after Josh Gibson died. It filters into a flashback in 1930. Josh Gibson was reported to be the only player who ever hit a ball completely out of Yankee Stadium. And then we fall right into him as a young ball player, about to be married. His wife actually gave birth to twins, then died in childbirth. A lot of people trace that to the beginning of Josh Gibson's decline. Through the rest of the first act, he's a hero in the Negro League community, and the first act culminates with Josh Gibson actually being called by the owners of the Washington Senators. And this is Clark Griffith, the owner of the Washington Senators, and he sings these great lines. "I've long been a champion of the Negro race," which is a total lie. Here's my rattling woofer. They end up telling him just how awful it would be if baseball was integrated. These 2 white baseball men almost take a little bit too much joy in telling Josh just how awful it would be with him and how magnanimous they are, but of course they can't break up the Negro Leagues. They sing, you know, "We're only thinking of what's best for you," when they tell him it's not gonna happen. The act ends with Josh being crestfallen, you know, and really kind of scandalized by this experience. And the second act of the opera traces his demise. You know, my intention with the opera was to go for the jugular. I didn't want to make this a cerebral, kind of poetic exercise. I think it's going to move people. This is an opera about baseball. This is an opera about civil rights and social justice and American history. It's an opera that has the capacity to pull in groups of people who aren't necessarily the most likely opera audiences. This was the work I had to write.